extraterrestrial free-brain being who, thanks to his conscious labors, discovered this method, that was even present at several conclusive experiments he conducted on possible ways of applying it to beings. His name was a seaman and he was a member of a group. As contemporary Asiatic free-brain beings who had recognized their slavish dependence upon certain causes within them, and had organized a collective existence for working on themselves to become free from this inner slavery. It is interesting to note that this group of terrestrial free-brain beings, one of whom was Big Brother Seaman, originally existed in the country formerly called Pearl, and now called India. When beings from the continent of Europe appeared there and began disturbing them and hindering their peaceful work, they all migrated across what are now called the Himalayan mountains, and settled partly in the center of Tibet and partly in what are called the valleys of the Hindu Kush. Single quote. Brother Seaman was one of the group that have settled in the valleys of the Hindu Kush. Time was precious to the members of this brotherhood who were working for their self-perfection, and the process of eating robbed them of a great deal of time. Brother Seaman, being well versed in the science then called alchemy, set to work very earnestly in the hope of finding what is called a chemical preparation, the introduction of which into himself would make it possible for a being to exist without spending so many hours in preparing and consuming all sorts of products for his first being food. After long and intensive work, Brother Seaman found for this purpose a combination of chemical substances in the form of a powder, one small envelope, of which, taken once every 24 hours, enabled a being to exist without consuming anything else but water, and to fulfill all his being obligations satisfactorily. When I chanced to visit this monastery where Brother Seaman existed with the other brethren of that small group of your contemporary favorites, they had all been using this preparation for 5 months, and Brother Seaman, with them. Selfison of the other brethren who were also very familiar with this substance, was intensely busy with experiments, this time on a large scale. And these experiments showed them that in the long run even this preparation could not suffice for normal being existence. After they had verified this, they not only entirely ceased using this powder, but even destroyed the very formula for preparing it that Brother Seaman had found. Several months later I happened to return to that monastery and to acquaint myself with a document these brethren had composed on the very day that they ceased once and for all to use this astonishing preparation. This document contained, among other things, several very interesting details about the actions deduced by a seaman's preparation. It stated that when this preparation was introduced into the presence of a being, in addition to its nutritive properties, this substance had a particular effect upon what are called the wandering mucus of the stomach, which is that not only did the need for food immediately cease in beings, but the desire to consume any edible product whatsoever also entirely disappeared, and if one of them was obliged to swallow something it took a long time for the resulting disappearable state to pass. This document also said that at first no change had been noticed in the presences of the beings who took this preparation. was an ecstatically impartial criticism of the life of man. This poor upstart author, by the way, will be hated by the full-blooded materialist and by the 96-carat beast and even by those of the free-brained beings who are taking their fancy route, as long as their stomachs are full and they, mistresses, are making no corrigible optimists believe, on the contrary, when their stomachs are empty become hopeless pessimists. Now, my boy, that you have mentioned this, dear upstart writer, there is nothing for it but to inform you here about the perplexity concerning him that long ago arose in me, and that continues to increase with regard to a certain naivete of faith. I must tell you that from the very beginning of his responsible existence, he also became, whether by accident or by the will of fate I do not know, a follower, and in fact a very devout follower, of our wise and esteemed Moa Nasser Eddin, and that furthermore, in the ordinary has not had one or another form of them. There is no harm in your knowing, among other things, a little more about those interesting and peculiar data in my statistics which indicate how much more widespread diseases are among the beings of the continent of America and Europe than among those of the continent of Asia. Many of these venereal diseases are entirely absent in the beings of the old Asiatic communities, whereas among European and American beings, they are almost epidemic. Let us take for example what is called crap, or as terrestrial scientists call it, gonorrhea. On the continents of Europe and America, almost all the beings both of male and female sex have this disease in one or another of its different phases, while on the continent of Asia it is met with only on the borders, where beings frequently mingle with beings of the continent of Europe. The beings belonging to the community existing under the name of Asia, on the continent of Asia, can serve as a good illustration of what has just been said. Among the beings dwelling in the central, eastern, southern, and western areas of this relatively large territory, these diseases are not to be found at all. But in the northern part, especially in the region called Azerbaijan, which is in direct contact with the large half-European, half-Asiatic community of Russia, the percentage of beings infected with this disease increases in proportion to their proximity to this Russia. And exactly the same is true in other eastern countries of the continent of Asia. The incidence of this disease is in proportion to the amount of contact between the beings of these countries and those of the continent of Europe and India, for example, and in parts of China. This disease has recently become widespread, chiefly in those places where they come into contact with European beings of the community of England. Thus it is safe to say that the chief disseminators of this disease among the beings of the continent of Asia are, on the northwest, the beings of the large community of Russia, and on the east, those of the community of England. The reason why this disease, as well as many other evils, does not exist in the rest of the continent of Asia is, in my opinion, that most of the beings of this continent have retained several very good customs for their daily existence, which have reached them from their remote ancestors. These customs are so deeply implanted by their religion in their everyday existence that, by observing them mechanically without any wise acting, beings are more or less protected from certain evils which, owing to the abnormally established conditions of existence, have arisen and continue to rise in incalculable numbers on that ill-fated planet. The beings of most of the groups on the continent of Asia are safeguarded against many venereal diseases, as well as against many others, sexual abnormalities, if only by the customs known there by the names of Suniat and Abgas. Single quote. The first of these customs, namely, Suniat, or, as it is otherwise called, circumcision, adult, being with almost all the contemporary jokes of the continent of Asia perform on their results, that is to say, on their male children, at a certain age, a ritual which consists in cutting what they call the frenum, and the prepuce, of the penis. Today, the children of those contemporary terrestrial beings who are automatically subject to this practice are almost completely safeguarded against the inevitable consequences of certain evils, already definitely fixed in the process of existence of your favorites. For example, according to my statistics, that is, children donatism, is scarcely met with among those who observe this custom of circumcision. Whereas the young beings who fail to observe this custom are, without exception, susceptible to this sexual abnormality. The second custom I mentioned, that of avant-garde, which by the way is given different names by the beings of different groups on the continent of Asia, is nothing but the obligatory ablution of the sex organs after each visit to what is called the water closet. Single quote. Thanks chiefly to this second custom, most of your favorites breeding on the continent of Asia are free of many venereal diseases and other sexual abnormalities. Single quote quote. Having said this, Beelzebub became thoughtful, and after a long pause said, "The theme of our present talk reminds me of a certain interesting conversation I had, during my sojourn in France, with a young and most congenial free-brained being. Perhaps, it will be best for your understanding of everything that has just been said if I repeat that conversation to you in full, the more so as, besides explaining the meaning of the custom of abdas, or ablution, it will enlighten you on many other questions relating to the peculiar psyche of these favorites of yours." The being with whom I had this conversation was that young surgeon who, you remember, at the request of our mutual acquaintances, his mom, died, in the city of Paris, where I happened to be just before my departure to the continent of America. One day I was waiting for this young surgeon on the terrace of the famous Grand Café in the city of Paris. As soon as he arrived, I saw from his eyes that he was, as they say there, more drunk than usual. In general, he drank more than his share of the alcoholic beverages existing there, and when we were together in the restaurants in Montmartre where it was obligatory to order champagne, which I neither liked nor drank, he always drank it all himself with great pleasure. Besides drinking too much, he was also, as is said there, a great skirt chaser. Single quote. The moment he saw the pretty face of a being of the female sex, his whole body and even his breathing abruptly changed. I noticed that this time he was more drunk than usual, and after he had sat down beside me and ordered coffee with an aperitif, I asked him, "Please explain to me, my young friend, why do you always drink this poison?" To this question of mine he answered, "My dear doctor, I drink this poison, in the first place, because I am so used to it that I cannot stop drinking without suffering, and in the second place, because only thanks to the effect of the alcohol can I look on calmly at close acquaintances to call me by these offensive names, I also began to grin. Furthermore, when I came to Europe for the first time, I became aware that conditions of life here, in respect of morality and proprietality, contrasted strongly with those in which I was born and brought up, and seeing in perceiving all this, I used to have a sickening feeling of shame and an unaccountable embarrassment. On the other hand, I noticed that alcohol not only relieved my distress, but drove me to look at everything quite calmly and even wish to participate in this abnormal life, so contradictory to my nature and established views. And that is why every time I feel this unpleasant sensation, I begin to drink, even with some feeling of self-justification, and little by little I have become accustomed to this poison, as you have quite justly called it. Having said this with a perceptible impulse of heartfelt grief, he paused a moment to light his cigarette made of a mixture of tobacco and tinder. Taking this opportunity, I asked him, well and good, assuming that I have more or less understood your explanation of your inexcusable drunkenness, and can put myself in your shoes, what about your other vice? My point of view just as inexcusable, that is, your drooling after petticoats. Why, you run after every skirt as long as it is around the hips of someone with long hair. At this question of mine, he sighed deeply, and then replied, it seems to me that I got this habit partly for the reason I already mentioned, but I think this weakness has still another interesting psychological explanation. If you like, my dear doctor, I will tell you in detail how I understand it myself. Of course I expressed my desire to hear him, but suggested our first going to find a grand cafe, into the restaurant itself, as it was already getting damp out of doors.